Hello everyone, the Bearded Minstrel here. The Bullroarer test servers went up for a short time this week, and we got our first glimpse of 25.3 and the new 6-man instances. I wanted to do a quick first impressions video to talk about what's in store and what you can expect from these brand new dungeons. When you log in, you're going to get a quest to speak to Pharaon in Minas Morgul. This is the breadcrumb to Geshan Kutat, the Halls of Black Lore. We caught a glimpse of this dungeon during the quest Nothing for Nothing in Minas Morgul, but it looks like we're going back to finish the job. The dungeon itself is full of shades, armors, and humanoid casters, so make sure you have your fear pots at the ready. Geshan Kutat is a relatively small dungeon, with one corridor before the main room where all of the boss fights occur. Dol Gulzagir, the final boss, asks you to relive momentous battles from your past before you can face him. This is a 3-tier boss fight with some very famous bosses from LoTRO's history. The first fight's against Vraz the Cook from Phil Geshan in Moria. It's a straightforward boss fight. The only complaint I have is that Vraz doesn't yell, "Would you like that pan seared?" or any of his famous quotes at any point during the fight. Instead, he just repeatedly yells, "Get that race in class." This is probably a bug, but if it isn't, SSG, if you're watching, please add those lines. They're great. The second fight's against Udunian from Baird Gularan. This was one of my favorite dungeons during Shadows of Angmar, so I was really stoked to see him again. The fight's almost a carbon copy of his abilities from BG, but there are no real mechanics to speak of. Clear fears and wounds and just tank and spec. Next, you take on the Ringforge of Orthanc from the Foundry of the Rise of Isengard cluster. You want to be very careful during this fight because Gashanuz constantly drops powerful fire dart circles on the ground, and you want to avoid these at all costs and definitely don't stack them. The final battle before Dol Gulzagir is against Skorgrim Dourhand. Hey look, my current series is actually kind of relevant now. Neat. This is a typical tank and spec as well, but Skorgrim will constantly knock back the tank. I hope SSG tunes this back a little bit because I spent the entire fight pretending to be a tennis ball. Make sure to move away from his Hammer Strike ability, which is a frontal cone attack that takes out a fair bit of morale. It has a long induction, so it's pretty easy to avoid. After a quick run up some stairs, you're going to encounter Dol Gulzagir himself. I think this fight might be a bit bugged because the mechanics don't seem to be working correctly yet. Dol Gulzagir summons ads that each have a different effect on the player. However, during my attempt, he only summoned hatred and not regrets, grief, and despair. So hopefully this will be fixed soon so I can have a better understanding of the fight. And that's really it. The dungeon took me 20 minutes solo, and I'm sure I could have done it in 15. It was a ton of fun, and I'm glad SSG had an opportunity to bring back some old-time favorites, because I really love when they do things like that. You get these cool book stands after you complete the quest. They glow to seemingly indicate they can be interacted with, but that doesn't really work in beta, but it still looks cool. The next 2 dungeons are not part of the quest, so you can access them instantly from the instance finder. Barnir Nath, the House of Lamentation, is a 1, 2, or 6-man dungeon, same as Geshan Kutat, located deep in Thuringweth. It's ironic because if you follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/beardedminstrel by the way, I was actually running around here trying to figure out its purpose a few days ago. My questions were answered because it's a new 6-man dungeon. Once again, we have a dungeon full of shades, armors, and human casters. However, this dungeon is hard. Even in solo, I found myself often on the brink of death. So if you're going alone, make sure you bring pots, foods, etc. There are a ton of fears, poisons, and bleeds, so you want to stock up. This dungeon is much bigger than Geshan Kutat, but honestly, it's big for nothing. I found myself spending so much time trying to find my way around it, only to realize that you can just follow one path to complete the whole thing. So don't be too put off by its size, it's pretty straightforward if you want it to be. The first boss you encounter is Manozagar. Throughout the fight, he will take on the body of nearby objects such as an armor and a giant stone statue. Aside from that, it's a tank and spank, but the stone statue does a ton of damage, so make sure you have the healing to cover it. The next boss is Narkor the Fiend. He's located up the stairs to the left of the first boss, but if you're like me, you'll spend about 10 minutes running around trying to find out where to go. I don't mean to keep harping on about this, but unless the area serves some sort of purpose in the future, it should really be closed off. I don't necessarily want linear dungeons, but I don't want public dungeon style exploration in my 6-man dungeon, especially if it doesn't even have a purpose. Anyway, once I found him, I gotta say that this was the hardest and coolest fight I've had to solo at 130 yet. His design is so cool, and aside from doing a ton of damage, he summons literal inanimate objects to life to fight you. I wasn't expecting it, and I actually jumped out of my seat when I saw it. The final fight is against Morloth, but I can't really show you any footage because it's bugged. It turns out that this is a known bug on Bullroarer, so once this is actually fixed, I'll make sure to do a follow-up video. Like I said, this dungeon was a ton of fun. It would have been more fun if it wasn't so big. I know, I'll stop. But really, the chief complaint about some of SSG's newest dungeons is that they're either far too long to complete or just riddled with mechanics making them frustrating to get through. Filthwell, anyone? If you throw up some invisible walls and lower the number of mobs, this really would be a perfect dungeon. By the way, I'm really excited about the existence of this dungeon because I'm almost certain the next content update is Nirn, but I'll save that for another video. Alright, saving the best for last. The third and final dungeon is the Fallen Kings. As you can imagine, this is exclusively a 6-man instance where you fight against the Nazgul. This is a dungeon based in the Mordor Besiege Stone, so it's technically not canon, but it's so cool that I'm going to give it a lore pass anyway. You fight against the Witch King and the other 8 Nazgul in groups of 2, with the Witch King being the final fight. The Nazgul that come at you are chosen at random, and each one has a unique ability, so this fight's going to keep you on your toes every time you do it. And this instance is hard. I had to scramble to find 6 people to even try the instance, but even accounting for gear disparity and skill, this is a legitimately difficult encounter, and I gotta say, I think it needs to be reconsidered before going live. As I said, each Nazgul has a unique ability. For the most part, this means fear, poisons, etc. So again, make sure you stock up on pots, because you will need them. You literally cannot succeed this dungeon without them. However, there are 3 Nazgul in particular whose mechanics need some serious fine-tuning because they make the fight almost impossible. The Forsaken Reaver seems to not take any kind of physical damage or tactical damage that isn't light damage. That means that you need a hunter or a warden with light oils or a red minstrel to take this guy down. I don't know if this is intended, a bug, or a mechanic I perhaps failed to grasp. My group spent 15 minutes just trying to take this guy down. The Grim Southron has an ability that places a very strong poison on you that can't be cleansed. This means that you have to be power healed through it. It's significant, and with the wrong combination of Nazgul, you can find yourself dying very quickly. The Gloom of Nirn has an ability that drops a fear puddle on a random group member. This puddle will literally one-shot you. He seems to yell out when he's about to do it, but it's so hard to predict who will get it that it usually leads to a wipe. Unfortunately, I never got to the Witch King because my group kept running into problems with combinations or wipes from the Gloom of Nirn. I'm all about rough encounters, but mechanics that one-shot you or kill you quickly don't really have a place in LoTRO because skill or movement delay makes such mechanics very difficult to handle. WoW can handle such things because a healer can blow a cooldown that instantly heals their entire group to full, but in LoTRO, that's just not the case. That being said, with some refining, this can be a really fun fight. As it stands, I can only see the best players running this regularly, while the rest of the community skips it in favor of other instances. And don't even get me started on tier 3 because that's probably going to be a nightmare. And that's it. I think these dungeons need some work, but I'm very happy with the direction SSG is going and the content is greatly appreciated. I'll make sure to follow up on subsequent beta tests so I can see if there have been any improvements. Let me know how your beta experience on Bullroarer went, or if you have any questions that I can answer. Just let me know in the comments below. See you soon!